Imagine if you could easily implement user authentication on all your website. Now, what if I told you that in this video, you are going to learn that in an hour? I'm going to teach you the complete user authentication process using React and Firebase. Before we get started, please help this channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. I also want to remind you that this is just a small fraction of my complete React course that you can find on Udemy. Alright, so without further ado, let me show you the project that we are going to build together today. So here we can see the login page. You can find the link for this project in the description of the video. Make sure to download and open on Visual Studio Code so we can work together. So the first thing the user is going to see is going to be this login page. All the validation process here will be handled by Firebase. For example, if we try an invalid email, we can see the correct error message showing down here. Also, if we try to create a new account with an already existing user, we also have an error. And when we finally type in the correct credentials, then we can go ahead and show the landing page for the user. We also have this forgot password button that when clicked, the user will receive an email to reset the password. So all of that comes out of the box with Firebase. And in this video, I'm going to show you the complete process from creating a new project on Firebase to having all of this implemented. So if you're ready, I am ready. Let's get started. So let's go to Visual Studio Code. And the first thing you need to do is download the initial version for this project. So make sure to download it, open the terminal, run an npm install or npm I so you can install all the dependencies. Then run vite so you can see it on the web browser. So we are keeping the state with Redux. We have reducers to do all the tasks we need here, like toggle the isRed property or erase a book. Everything is being handled now in Redux. But we have these new components. So if you go, for example, to the app.jsx and instead of using the books page here, you use the login page, this is ready for us to start working on the functionality. So make sure to download this version, run the npm install, and run it on your web browser so we can get started. So let's go to the next video so we can kick off this very cool project. I'll see you then. Hey there, in this video, we're going to set up our first Firebase project. So the first step is going to console.firebase.google.com. And once you do it, make sure to be logged in to your Gmail account. If you don't have a Gmail account, create one so you can use Firebase. If you have multiple Gmail accounts like I do, make sure to have the correct one selected before you go ahead. So now we can go to create a project. And here let's choose a meaningful name for the project. For example, book list with Firebase. Let's check these two boxes and click continue. Now this is about Google Analytics. I want to avoid distractions as much as possible in this project, so I'm going to disable the analytics for now. Now let's create a project. This may take a minute, so let me speed up the video. Now the project is ready. Let's click continue. And here we can see that we can use Firebase for iOS, Android, web, Unity, and Flutter. In our case, we are working on a web application with React, so we are going to choose web. Now here we need to register the app. I'm just going to choose the same thing, so book list. And let's click on also set up Firebase hosting. This is important because later we are going to deploy the application so we can see it published online. Now let's register the app. And now on the code side, we need to do two things. The first is to install Firebase in the project. So let me copy this. Let me open a new terminal and run npm install Firebase. Okay, now if we go to the package.json, we can see that Firebase has been added to the list of dependencies. And now going back there, we have to import this code. So let me copy the whole thing, or just press this button here to just copy everything. Let's go back there. And to keep things clean, it is good that we add a new folder for Firebase. So inside the source folder, I'm going to add a new folder for Firebase. And inside this folder, I'm going to add one file called config.js. And inside here, we are going to paste all that code. So this is going to come with all the API keys and everything to be configured. And this is going to be available for us to use throughout our application. We save this. Now let's go back there, go to the next step. Now we need to install Firebase CLI. So later on, we can host our website with Firebase hosting. This is going to install Firebase tools globally on your computer. We can see the -G flag right here. So you can copy this and run this on the command line. I'm not going to do it for now because I already installed it previously, but you can go ahead and do it. If you have problems with permissions while you do that, on Windows, you can open Visual Studio Code as administrator and then run this code on the terminal. And on Mac, you can add the sudo before npm. So sudo npm install, and then you will be prompted to type in your password and you will be able to install it globally. So let's go to the next step. These are the things we are going to need to deploy the application. We don't have to do this right now because we are just getting started. We are not going to host it for now. So let's go to the console, and now we have the project set up. And if we go to build, we will see that we have many things here to manage on our website. We have storage, hosting, we have the Firestore database, we have authentication, and these are some of the things that we will be using in this project. We also have extensions, we have machine learning, so a lot of cool stuff that Firebase provides to you. You also have interesting tools for releasing your project. You have this whole analytics tab and the engage tab, which will give you A/B testing and some more features. So most of the things we will do will be under this build tab. And the first thing we are going to start is with authentication. So we can now move on to the next video so we can get started. Hey there, now that we have Firebase set up, the first thing that we are going to work on in this project is going to be the login process. So for that, we need to go to the Firebase console and configure a few things. You can find authentication under build, and it is the first link. Once you go inside it for the first time, it will be added to the project shortcuts. So here you have a few tutorials. You can read the documentation, you can watch this video, but let's go straight to get started so we can follow the instructions. Now we need to choose one or more methods of login on our website. Every login method that we want to implement, we are going to need to enable it first. So for the sake of simplicity, for this project, I'm going to choose email and password. The Gmail sign-in is also interesting, but I don't want to spend too much time on the same thing because we have a lot of subjects to cover on Firebase to complete this project. So let's go with email and password, but once you learn how to set this up, you will see how easy it is. So you will be able to implement all these other providers easily if you want to do that. So let's go to email and password and let's enable it. I'm not going to choose email link. Let's just go for the regular email and password login. So let's save it. And now this is enabled on the backend side, so we can start implementing it on the front end. Now, before we go back to Visual Studio Code, let me show you where the documentation is. So you can go to the top right corner of the screen in this Go to Docs link. Then right here, you have the complete documentation about Firebase. I find it very simple to understand, and they have a lot of coding examples. So we are going to be coming back here a lot to get pieces of code and reuse in our project. For authentication, we can go to build, then authentication. Once we go inside here, we need to go to web, which is the type of project we are working on, and we can go to get started. So here, this is going to give you useful information about how to work with authentication. So here we can see the configuration which we already placed on a separate file. And the first thing we need to do is import get auth and create the auth variable so we can start working with authentication. Now, instead of doing this on every component that needs authentication, since we are going to need it on different locations, let's do this on the configuration file. So let's copy this line of code first. And now let's go to the config file for Firebase, which, by the way, I'm going to erase these comments. If you want to keep it, it's completely fine. It's just explaining a few things. I just prefer to keep it cleaner. So I'm going to paste that line right here to import get auth, and I'm going to create the variable here. And now one difference here is that since we are creating this variable inside the configuration file, let's export this variable so we can use it in other components. All right, so now that we have created this, let's go to the login page where we are going to get started. You can see we have some state variables right here. This is just to define what is the login type, if we are logging in or creating a new account. This is important because the function we have to execute on Firebase is going to be different depending on if you are a new user or an existing user. And there's also this is loading, which we are going to use to set a loader later. So now whatever we need to use the authentication system, we can just import it from here. So we created that variable inside that configuration file and we exported it. So now we can import from this component. So let's do that now. This is inside the views folder. So let me just jump out of it, then go to firebase/config.js. And before we do anything else, let's just do a console.log with the auth variable so we know what we have inside here. Let's save this. Let's go back there. And now let's go to the inspector, open the console. And we can see we have a lot of properties regarding authentication, including one that's going to be very important later, which is the current user. Right now, we are starting from the login page, so we don't have any user logged in. But once we are able to log into the application, we are going to see the information of the user right here. So now we have the authentication setup. And as I've mentioned, I have this state variable, which is controlling if we want to log in or sign up. I'm also changing the button down here so we can call different functions depending on what the user chooses. So now we are ready to move on to the next video so we can start with sign up. Since we don't have any account created on the application yet, let's start with the sign up process. So hopefully by the end of the next video, we are already able to create our first user. I'll see you then. Hey there, in this video, we are going to build the functionality to sign up new users. So the first thing we have to do here, which will serve for both the login and the sign up process, is to get the information typed in these two fields. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code. And here we are inside the login page component. We already brought the auth variable and we did a console.log just to see what we have inside of here. So the first thing we need to do here is to add the variables for the password and for the email. We could add two different variables, one for the email and one for the password. But I want to teach you something that you can use, and it's going to be useful especially when you are handling bigger forms. Let's say you have a form with 5 or 10 fields, then it would be very tedious to create one state variable for each of the fields. So a cooler thing you can do is the following. I'm going to create a new state variable, and instead of defining it as the password or the email, I'm going to call it user credentials. And this is going to store both the email and the password. So user credentials and set user credentials. This is going to be a state variable, and it is going to start as an empty object. Now the key thing here is that the names of the fields, so in this case, the email and the password, they have the names that we need as the final properties. So this one is going to create a property called email, and this one is going to create a property called password. So what we have to do in these inputs is the following. We are going to set an onChange event for them. When there is a change, we are going to pass the event so we have access to which field is being changed. And we are going to run this function called handle credentials. And here we are going to pass the event. And the cool thing here is that we are going to use the same function for the email and for the password. And then we only have to create one function that will take care of all the fields, no matter how many fields we have. So right here, I'm going to create a new function. And every time we run this function, we are going to set the user credentials again. And we are going to bring the current user credentials. Let's use the spread operator to bring only the properties. And we are going to replace dynamically the property that's being changed right now. And we can do that using braces. And we are going to pass e.target.name, which is going to be that attribute I just showed you. And it is going to get e.target.value. Now to see if this is working, let's do a console.log with the user credentials. We save this, we go back there. Now let's start typing something here. So as you can see, while I'm typing the email, we are forming that object with the user credentials with the email. Now when we start typing the password, we are now forming that object with the password property. So the cool thing here, like I mentioned, is that if you have multiple form fields, you can just use that same function for all the fields as long as in their name attributes, they have the name of the property that you want in the final object. Okay, so now that we are getting the credentials, let's create a function so when we click the login or the sign up button, we can send the credentials to Firebase. So going back to Visual Studio Code, remember that we are going to need two different functions, one for the login and one for the sign up. So let's start with the sign up. Let's create a function called handle sign up. We are going to need to receive the event here to run the prevent default and don't submit the form and don't run the default form submission. So we are going to start with e.prevent default. And then we can start writing our function. Now we are going to copy this and let's go down here. Let's find that button. So here we have the button for the sign up. This is the one we want to attach this function to. So we are on click, going to call a function passing the event. This is going to be the handle sign up and we are going to pass the event with it. Now let's do a console.log here just to see if everything is working. And then we need to choose sign up. When we click sign up, we can see that this is firing. So now we need to know which function we should call from Firebase and what information we need to send. So let's go to the documentation. Let's go to build authentication, then web, and let's go to password authentication. Let's remember that the method we chose was the email and password authentication. If you are setting up Google login or Facebook or any of the other methods, then you can just go to the correct documentation. So for the password authentication, here is how we should send the information to Firebase when we want to create a new account. Here we have coding examples with Web Modular API and Web Namespaced API. I prefer to use the Web Modular API. So here we have to import a few things from Firebase/auth. Let's get this now. And going back there, one would be the get auth, but we don't have to bring this one because remember that we are already running get auth in this auth variable. So this is the one we are going to use, and we need to bring only the create user with email and password. Now let's get the rest of the code here. Like I mentioned, we already have the auth variable. We don't need to write that part. So let's copy the rest of it and let's bring it here. And inside our function, we are going to paste that code. And let's understand that this is an asynchronous function. This is going to return a promise because we are going to submit this information to the server. And when it is back, we are going to be inside the then. So as you can see, when we get inside, it means that we successfully created the user and we are now signed in. If there is an error in the process, we are going to go inside the catch and we are going to have important information about the error. Now we just need to do some adjustments because remember that we have the email and the password in the same object, which is called user credentials. So here we are going to get these credentials from this state variable. And if we are able to sign in, then we are going to create the user. Let's send it to the console. If we can't, then let's just send the error. So I'm going to send the error code and also the error message. All right, so let's go back there and see what happens. Now here, let's remember to choose sign up and let's start with an invalid email and a 123 password. Let's click sign up. And as you can see, we sent the request to Firebase and Firebase returned telling us that there was an error. In this case, it was an invalid email. So like I mentioned in the introduction video, Firebase is going to handle all these cases for us. So now that we are receiving back an error, we can show the error on the page. We are going to handle this in the next video, but for now, let me try to create a valid account. So I'm going to use this email and I'm going to set the password as 123456. Let's sign up. And it took a while, and as you can see, we received this object back from Firebase. And this means that we were able to successfully create a new user and we are now logged in. The two most important pieces of information here are the email and the user ID. Now we are not seeing anything in the interface because we still have to manage what happens after we are logged in. But if we go to Firebase now and go to Authentication, we can see that this user already appeared in the list of users. So very quickly, we were able to handle the account creation process. Now let's go to the next video so we can handle the errors and show the error message below the button. I'll see you then. Hello, in this video, we're going to handle the errors we received back from Firebase. So let's go to Visual Studio Code and let's remember that we have two situations here. One, if the request is successful, which we are sending the user to the console, and another one for the error. So what we need to do is show the error to the user somehow. And I think the best way of doing this is to add an error element right below the submit button. So right here, let's add an element and let's be careful with the class name here because we have some CSS for this. So I created something in the CSS for a class name of error. So let's add div.error. And here, if we type something like error, we save this. We go back there, we can see that this red message is going to show below the button. And this is where we want to send the error to. Now, we don't want to be displaying this field all the time. So a nice way of doing this is using declarative UI, which means that we are going to have a state variable controlling the error, and we are only going to show it if there is some error. So we can start the curly braces, and if there is an error, then we can show this element. And what we want to show inside here instead is the error. So let's create this state variable at the top here where we have the other state variables. We can create one called error and set error. It's going to start as an empty string. And now down here, when we have any error, we are just going to set the value to that variable. And then it is going to be visible on the page. So we are going to use set error to define a value to that state variable. And we are going to pass the error message. So let me just clean all these console.logs, this one as well as this one. Now here we can also delete the comments so we can start cleaning things up. Now we know that we have error code and error message. We don't need to keep these things here anymore. And we can now save this, go back there, and let's try again. I'm going to refresh the page, and I'm going to start with an invalid email. Try to sign up. And then, as you can see, Firebase sends us back that error, and we are showing this error right here. So now any situation that can happen here, for example, if we try to create an account with an already existing user, let's do that right now. I'm going to use that same email that I already created an account with, and I'm going to click sign up. And as you can see, now we are seeing a different error saying that the password should be at least 6 characters. Let's choose one with 6 characters, click sign up. And now as you can see, there's an error again because the email is already in use. Of course, we could personalize this message by getting the error code and creating like a dictionary where we could have our own error messages. But for this example, this is clear enough. So we can see that we can't create an account because this email is already in use. So like I mentioned, Firebase is handling all these login problems for us. We just have to get the error back and show it to the user. Now, one thing we can do is clean this message when we try again. You can do this when you type again or when you click the button again. It's really up to you. And the way we are going to do this is the following. If we go back there, we can copy this, and after seeing the error, we could have it right here. So when we start typing again, we are going to erase that message. This would be one way of handling this. So let's go back there and see. Let's press sign up. We see the error, and when we click the field and start typing again, we don't see the message. That's one way of doing this, but I prefer to leave the error message so the user remembers what was the problem while trying again. So instead of cleaning this up here, I'm going to clean this up when we try again. So when we click the button to submit again, then I will clean up that error message. So let me refresh the page. The error message will be shown. Now let me enter a valid email and a valid password. And when we click sign up, the error message disappeared, and now we are probably logged in. If we go to Firebase, let's refresh the users list. As you can see, the new account has been created. And now, of course, we need to see this being reflected in the UI, but first we need to work on the login process. So this is what we are going to do in the next video. I'll see you then. Hey there, in this video, we are going to work on the login process, which is going to be very similar to the sign up one. The only difference will be the function we are going to call from Firebase. So let's go to the documentation, and let's remember that we were under password authentication. So this was the part to create a new account. Now that we are able to create accounts, let's see how we can log in with existing ones. So let's scroll down, and here we can see sign in a user with an email and password. And this is exactly what we need. We don't need to import all of this again, just the sign in with email and password function. So as you can see, the names are pretty much self-explanatory. So going back to Visual Studio Code, up here, we are going to import this function, and the names of the functions are super long, and we are going to need more functions in the next videos. So I prefer to break a few lines for the ones from Firebase. So let's leave it like this, and then we'll be able to read better all the functions we are importing from Firebase. Now going back there, let's see the example. So this is going to be what we are going to do. Let's copy all this. And what we need to do here is create a function to handle the login. So let's add a new function. Let's call it handle login. Let's paste all this here. Here we are going to need the event as well, so we can do the prevent default. things will be pretty similar inside here. So we are going to run this, and then we are going to reset the error. And again, we are going to set any errors that occur to that variable so we can see it reflected in the UI. And here we will place the code with what happens if there is a success in the login. So for this, let's just do a console.log, just so we know that the process happened without any problems. And I'm going to do the same up here as well, just so we know if the process occurred without any problems. Now let's not forget to adjust the email and password. Let's save this, and we need to add the handler to the button. So let's go down there, and remember that we have a sign up button, which is different from the login button. So let's add it to the login button. And here, this is going to be handle login. Now we save this, go back to the page. Let's refresh the page. Let's try a few errors first. So again, an invalid email. We click login and we see the error showing right here. Now let's try that account we already created. So I will try a wrong password, login, and as you can see, wrong password. Now I'm going to use the correct one, login, and this time we were able to log in successfully. So as you can see, once we did the first part, the second was super easy. We just had to call a different function. Now we are almost ready to go on and decide what we are going to show to the logged in users. There's one little thing that we still have to do in this screen, which is the forgot password button. And this is what we are going to do in the next video. Hi there, in this video we're going to build the reset password functionality. This is going to be something extremely simple. We just have to import a new function from Firebase. So let's go to Visual Studio Code, and if we scroll down in the login page, we can see we have this button right here. And what we have to do here is set the onClick event. And then we are going to call a function called handle password reset. This is going to be a function that we will create right now. So let's copy the name of it. Let's go to the top. And here, let's create a function with that name. We don't need to pass the event for this one. We're just going to have to do a few things. So the first is getting the email. Now, the problem here is the following. Some people will click on the forgot password without typing in anything. So I don't think getting the email from this field is the best option in this case. Normally, when you click forgot password, you need to retype your email. And here we can do this with the prompt function. So let's create a new variable for the email. And we are going to prompt the user to type in again. So we can type something like, please enter your email, and then we are ready to execute the function from Firebase. And the name of this function is send password reset email. What we need to send as an argument is first the authentication and then the email address. Now let's not forget to import this function. So at the top here, let's import it from Firebase. And then we can send a final message to the user. So we could say something like email sent. Check your inbox for password reset instructions. Okay, saving this. Let's go back there, refresh the page. Let's click forgot password. As you can see, the field was blank, but this is still going to work because we need to retype the email. So the email was react.firebase.course@gmail.com. Click OK. Email sent. Let's go to the inbox to check. As you can see, the email is already here, which is fantastic. Let's click on the link. Let's reset the password. Save this. And now if we try to log in, now we are able to log in with the new password. So as you can see, one more time, something that would require a lot of work from our side is made very simple with Firebase. Now, one thing here is if you don't like this template, as you can see, there's the name of the project, which is not cool. There's also this message. If you want to change the template for this email, you can easily do that from Firebase. You can just go to Authentication and then Templates. So as you can see, we have the password reset email, which is the one we just received, and it's showing the app name right here in the subject as well. That's why we are seeing the project name. So if you want to change this, you can just go to Edit Template. You can change the sender name, you can change the subject, all the text of the email. So then it is going to have the template you want for your application. All right, so this part is also done. So in the next video, we are going to show the users the home screen of our application. I'll see you then. Hey there, now that we've finished all the work needed in the login page, we are handling the errors, we have the process set up for logging in and signing up new users, we have the forgot password button working. Now we are ready to go on and show the home page for logged in users. So let's go to Visual Studio Code. And the first thing we need to do here is create a piece of state in the application where we can store the logged in user. This is an information that could be used by different components, so it is a good idea to have an app level state. And we are going to use Redux to do that for us. Let's remember that we have a few slices here. So what we built in the previous section was this application with one slice for the notes and one slice for the books. And now we are going to create a new slice for the users. So let's create a new file right here and let's call it users slice. Now we can copy everything from the notes slice just so we save some time. Now we are going to call this user slice. Let's adjust the name. The initial state is going to be an object instead. And there will be a property called current user, which is going to start as null. Now for the reducers, we are just going to have one reducer, which is going to be to set the user. We are going to use this function to both log in a user and to log it out. So here, let's call users, which is going to be the state inside this slice and the action. And what we are going to do here is the following. We are going to do users.currentUser is going to be what we receive in the action. So that's pretty much what we need for now. And here we can just export the set user. Let's not forget to adjust the name of the slice. Here we are going to have a select users. And let's correct it here as well. So this is all we need for the reducer. Let's not forget to add it to the list right here. So we are going to have a new slice right now, which is going to be the one for the users. And let's import it from here. Now there are just two things that we have to do here. First, when we finish the login, we need to set the user in the state. So for this, let's go up here and let's import the use dispatch. Actually, we can go to another component and just copy this line of code. So we are going to bring use dispatch, and let's go to the single book page. We are importing a reducer right here, so we can do the same thing right here. We are going to bring use dispatch, and we are going to bring set user from the user's slice. So right at the top here, let's create a variable for the dispatch. And now once we are able to log in or create an account successfully, which at the moment we are just sending this console.log, we can actually go ahead and set the user. So I'm going to leave the console.log for now, just in case there are any errors, we can see how this object is coming. But here we can dispatch that action. The name of it is set user. And we are going to pass an object with an ID, which is going to come from user credential.user. And let's remember that one of the properties we had was called UID when we log in. This is the ID of the user. And we are also going to create a property called email, so we can store the email of the logged in user. And this is going to be inside the email property. Now this, what we are doing right here, dispatching the action from here, this is not what is recommended by Firebase. But let's do it here first, and then I will show you what is the recommendation from Firebase and what are the problems we can have in dispatching this from here. Now let's copy this line of code and let's do the same thing for the handle login. Now in the user slice, in the set user function, we can also do a console.log just to see if we are reaching this point in case there is any error. I'm going to send this to the console, also the payload, just in case we need to fix some issues. So let's save this and let's see if this is working. Going back there, let me open the inspector. I'm going to sign in with my credentials. We log in, and as you can see, we are reaching the set user, and at this point, we were able to set the user with the correct email and ID. Pretty cool. Now we can go back there. We can already remove this console.log from here. We know that this is working fine. So we just need to go to the app page, and instead of showing the login page, we need to show the add book page. So here we need to select the user. Let's remember that inside the slice, we have this select users. So let's import it. This is inside the store folder, inside the users slice file. And now we can just create a new variable for the user, and we are going to use selector. And let's use the select users. So at this point, we know if we have a user logged in or not. So we just need to decide what to show the user. Now let me show you the wrong way first, because many people make this mistake. So we could think that we could go inside the root and we could do the tests right here. So if we have a user.currentUserSet, let's remember that this is the property we created inside the reducer. Then we build this root. Again, let me remind you that this is not the correct way, but I just want to show you something real quick. If we don't have, then we can just go ahead and show the login page like we had before. And here we are going to show the books page, which was the original home page of our application. Now, before we save this, let's just import the use selector. I forgot to do this. This has to come from React Redux. So import use selector from React Redux. Now we can save this, go back there. And first we are seeing the login page. Let's log in. Do the login. The login is done and we are able to land on the front page. This is really cool, but there is one little problem with this approach. Let me refresh the page so we can be logged out. And even though when we land on the application, we are seeing the login page when we are logged out, even if we are logged out and we go to a different URL, for example, the add book URL, as you can see, we are able to access this page even without being logged in. Of course, we wouldn't be able to add a book because to do that, to add a book to the database, we need to be logged in and Firebase would return an error. We wouldn't be able to change anything, but just the fact that we can enter here is already a problem. So what we did wrong here is that we formed the URLs and just inside here, we decided what to show as the front page. So all the other routes are built even with the user logged out. So this is what I wanted to show you because I've seen this mistake before. And what we need to do instead is the following. This test has to be done outside here. And then we can remove this URL for the login page. And all of this is only going to be built if the user is logged in. If not, then we are just going to show the login page without any routes. Now let's close the curly braces right here. And now if we save this and go back there, we can see we have the login page even in the /addbook. So we can't access other URLs of the page. If we try to go to /addbook, this is not going to work because before logging in, we are not building that routing structure. So let's log in again. And now we are able to view the page we were trying to view. And this is the expected behavior. Now there is one thing we need to improve here. Not sure if you noticed, but I was logged in and just because I refreshed the page to go to a different URL, I got logged out again. And this, of course, is a terrible experience for the user. If every time we refresh the page, we have to log in again, we are not going to want to use this application at all. So what we need to do is persist the login state. The good news is that with Firebase, there is a native function that can handle that for us. And this is what we are going to do in the next video. I'll see you then. Hey there, in the previous video, we were able to land the logged in users on the home page, but there is one problem that we need to fix here because the login state is not persistent, which means that if we copy this URL and open a different tab, as you can see, we are not logged in on this tab. If we refresh the page here, we are going to be logged out as I showed you in the previous video. And also if we press Ctrl and open a link on a different tab, for example, I want to view this book in a different tab, I can't do it because I'm being logged out. This is because we need the login state to persist in the browser session. So this is something super simple to do with Firebase. So let's go to the documentation and let's search here for set persistence. Let's click here. So as you can see, for a web application, the default behavior is to persist a user's session even after the user closes the browser. It is just giving us a warning that some applications, for example, ones that contain sensitive data, this has to be done differently. But for our books application, it is completely fine to just use the default behavior. If you're working on an application like this, you can scroll down and there are some instructions on how you can change the persistence behavior. But in our example, why is this not working? Why isn't the default behavior not working? Remember that when we were creating the login function, I told you that dispatching this set user function from here wasn't the correct thing to do. So the thing is, Firebase is keeping the persistence in the browser session. But the problem is that we are only setting the user in the state when we run these functions. So when we open our application on another page, we are never reaching this point. So this is why we are being logged out. we can actually do a quick test right here. So we can get the auth, and right at the top here, we can do a console.log auth. Let's save this. Let's go back there. Let me refresh the page. As you can see, we have a current user. We have the email right here and the user ID. So Firebase knows that we are logged in. We are logged in this session. Firebase is only going to log us out when we define a logout function. But like I explained, we are never reaching this code because we loaded the application again. And of course, we are not running these functions on page load. So this is why it's not a good idea to dispatch this from here. Instead, let's go to the documentation. Now let's go to the authentication section on Get Started. And if we scroll down to set an authentication state observer, we will see that this is the recommended method to know if a user is logged in or not. So remember that we were only setting the user to the state after the login function, but the recommended method is by using this observer. This is going to ensure that when we open a different tab, Firebase will get the current logged in state and will do what has to be done. So let's copy this piece of code. And here we can already delete this console.log. What we have to do in the login page is the following. When we go to a different tab, we are going to land here anyway, because we won't have a user set in the state yet. So we are going to go to this page. And when we go to this page, we can run that observer. So we can do it at the top here. First, we need to import this. So let's import this from Firebase. So if there is a user, we are going to do something. So here we can just copy this dispatch. And right here, we just have to change this to user. So user.uid, and the email is going to be user.email. Now we don't need this part of the code. If this observer detects that there is no user set, we need to clean the state so we can be logged out of other tabs as well. So here we are going to set the user to no again. This is important. It can't be an empty object, because if we set an empty object, this is not going to evaluate as false, but a new value will evaluate as false. So now we can save this. We can go back there. And now we are logged in. And as you can see, we saw the login page when we refreshed the page. Then we got the information from Firebase and we populated our user state. This is because this observer runs for the first time when we load the component, and then again whenever there is a change in the logged in state. Now the cool thing is that since this is going to run once and then every time the state changes, we don't even need to have this then block right here. Because when we logged in, there will be a change in the state of authentication, and we are going to run the function of that observer. So we can remove both of these here. This might be a bit confusing for whoever is looking at the code. So if you want to leave the then and maybe leave a comment, you can do that. But we don't need to run that code here, because whenever there is a change, we are going to dispatch it anyway from here. So we are almost done with the authentication. Now we just need to work in the logout function. And this is what we are going to do in the next video. I'll see you then. Hey there, in this video, we're going to work in the logout function. In the previous video, we set the persistence. So now, even if we close all tabs, open another browser window, we're still gonna be logged in. So we need to be able to log out when we want to. So let's go to the documentation. Right below authentication, web, we can go to password authentication. And if we scroll down to the bottom, we will see how we can sign user out. And we are going to use the sign out function. So let's copy this part of the code. Let's go to Visual Studio Code, and we are going to need to do this in the header because this is where we have the logout button. So I'm going to import this right here. I'm not going to bring get auth because instead I'm going to get the auth from our config file. And let's copy this part of the code. And we are going to place this inside a function that we can call handle signout. And then we can call the signout function. Now, before doing this, let's confirm with the user if he's sure he wants to sign out. So if, and let's use a confirm box. Let's tell the user, are you sure you want to log out? Then if the user says yes, we can go ahead and run this. So we are going to sign out from Firebase, and then we also need to clean our state. So this is reflected in the state of our application. Because if we don't do that on our side as well, we won't be able to do anything related to Firebase and the database that we're going to implement later, but we're going to still be able to move around inside the page. So we need to make sure that we are going to clean our state. So let's go to the login page and bring some things over here. We're going to need the set user and the use dispatch. So going back to the header, let's paste it here. And we also need to create the dispatch variable. Let's do that now before we create the function. And we can also copy this dispatch from here. So if we have a successful sign out, we can dispatch. If not, we can send something to the console. There's not a big chance of any errors occurring right here because in the end, this is just a function without arguments. We're just telling Firebase to log out. There's not much that can go wrong here, but anyway, if there is an error, we can send the error to the console. Now, the only thing missing is setting the click event for that button. So let's copy the name of the function. Let's go down to the button. Here it is. Let's add the onClick event. And when we click the button, we are going to call handle signout. So when we go back there, we can click log out. It is going to ask us if we want to log out. We click cancel, nothing happens. We click log out, okay. And now we are logged out. Now, if we go to another tab, we can see that we have been logged out from other tabs as well. Now, if we go back here and log in again, we click login, we logged in, and if we go to the other tab, we were automatically logged in. This is because we have that observer that's paying attention to the auth state. So this is really good. We are done with the login, logout process. There's just one thing that could be improved here, which is the following. Let me log in again. So now we are logged in. If I copy the address and I paste on a separate tab, press enter, we are going to see the login page for a moment. This was very fast. We didn't see it, but let's try to maybe open the book and then refreshing the page. As you can see, we saw the login page for a moment. And ideally, instead of seeing the login page like this, it would be better if we could see a loader. And this is what we are going to do in the next video. I'll see you then. Hey there, in this video, we are going to do one last improvement here to the login process. We're done with all the functionality needed, but as we saw in the previous video, when we are logged in and we refresh the page or go to another tab, sometimes we see this page for a moment before we can get the auth information from Firebase. So ideally, when that happens, we shouldn't be seeing that page, but a loader. So let's go to Visual Studio Code. And if we go to the login page, there is something that I left right here, which is this component called full page loader. Let's see what we have inside. This component is right here, and this is just a CSS loader. So if on this page, we have the full page loader, and as you can see, we have already this condition here. If isLoading is set to true, then we are going to show this component. And where is this variable? This is a state variable that I left right here. So if this is set to true, let me save this. Let's go back there. As you can see, we don't see anything anymore because this is an element with an absolute position that is taking the whole screen, 100% of the width and 100% of the height with a white background. This is why we can't see anything behind this element. So what I'm going to do here is the following. We are going to start this page with the isLoading set to true. But whenever we have the on-auth state changed, we are going to set it to false. So we can do set isLoading, and then only here we can set it to false. So when we open another tab, before we check the status of the auth object, we are going to be seeing the loader. After we define what should happen, if we are going to see the home page or if we are going to see the login page, then we are going to hide the loader and see the page we want to see. So if we save this now and go back there, let me just refresh the page. As you can see, we saw the loader for a moment, which is something that exists in many websites. And now I'm going to log in. And what happened here is that the page got frozen. And why is that? This is because this is running again and again and again, because we are changing the state of the application, making this run again. So this is running infinitely. Because when we change the value of set isLoading, we cause the application to re-render, and that fires this observer to run again, causing an infinite loop. So what we have to do instead is first we need to test if isLoading is set to true. If it is, we are going to set it to false. Now doing this, we make sure that we run this only once when we load the page. Then isLoading is going to be set to false, and we are not going to go inside here anymore. So let's save this. Let's go back there. Let me refresh the page. Maybe I will need to close this tab. Let me exit the page. Now load it again, and we can see the loader when we first land on the page. Now let me log in again. We log in, we see the books and everything, and if we go inside this page and we refresh the page, we're going to see the loader for a moment, and then we will see the information on the page. And this is much better than seeing that login page even when we were already logged in. So let me try to log out. And we are done with the authentication process. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, you can always leave them in the comments section below. Don't forget that the video you just watched is a small fraction of my complete React course that you can find on Udemy. Make sure to check the description of this video for the link with the promotional discount.